I can see the disappointment in Maya Rodriguez's eyes as she sits cross-legged on the worn brown carpet of her grandfather's living room, tucked behind the old piano bench that hasn't been tuned in decades. The plastic chair they gave her creaks every time she shifts, its legs uneven against the hardwood floor that grandfather Bob never got around to refinishing. She's wearing a simple black dress from Target and the ceramic dog necklace she made in high school pottery class, the one that always made her feel brave even when the world felt too big and too harsh. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Around the coffee table that still bears water rings from countless family gatherings, Maya's relatives sit in what she's learned to recognize as the circle of importance. Her brother Derek adjusts his pressed khakis and asks Sophia about her new promotion at the bank. Across from them, her father James laughs at something that wasn't particularly funny, and Linda Thompson, the woman who raised them all after their parents died, lifts her coffee mug with the kind of practiced grace that comes from years of hosting church potlucks and neighborhood watch meetings. Linda hasn't made eye contact with Maya since she arrived 3 hours ago from Portland, not when Maya knocked on the door, not when she helped carry folding chairs from the garage, not even when Maya quietly asked if she could help with anything in the kitchen. It's like Maya exists in a different dimension, visible but not quite real enough to acknowledge. The whisper cuts through the afternoon air like a blade through silence. "She shouldn't even be here," Linda murmurs to James, her voice low but not nearly low enough. Bob felt sorry for her, but she's not really family, not in the way that matters. The words hit Maya's chest like a physical blow, but she's learned to absorb these moments without flinching. She's had 26 years of practice. Attorney Sarah Mitchell sits at the head of the coffee table, her silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviews the documents spread before her. She's been the Thompson family lawyer for over 15 years, handling everything from Derek's DUI to Sophia's divorce papers to the incorporation documents for Thompson's Hardware and Garden Center. Her presence here means this is serious, official, final. Maya keeps her hands folded in her lap, fingers tracing the ceramic dog at her throat. She'd made it during her senior year of high school, back when she still thought she might find a place at this table, back when she believed that if she just tried hard enough, stayed quiet enough, achieved enough, they might finally see her as belonging here. The little dog's ears are slightly lopsided because her hands had been shaking that day in pottery class, shaking because Derek had just announced his acceptance to business school, and Sophia had gotten engaged to a lawyer, and Maya had received her acceptance letter to the veterinary technology program at Portland Community College. Community College, Linda had said when Maya shared her news that night over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Well, I suppose not everyone can be academic. She'd said it with a smile, the kind that's supposed to soften the blow, but somehow makes it cut deeper. Sarah Mitchell clears her throat, and the room falls into that particular kind of silence that accompanies life-changing moments. "We are gathered here today to execute the last will and testament of Robert Eugene Thompson," she begins, her voice steady and professional. "A man who believed deeply in family, in hard work and in seeing the best in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves." That draws a few appreciative murmurs from around the table. Maya recognizes the careful choreography of grief, the way families perform their love for the deceased, as if the performance itself could resurrect the relationship they never quite managed to perfect while the person was alive. She doesn't participate in the murmurs. She'd loved her grandfather genuinely, quietly, without needing an audience to witness it. Bob Thompson had been different from the rest of them, gentler somehow, more patient with Maya's questions about the animals that came into the hardware store, more interested in her stories about the injured birds she nursed back to health in cardboard boxes in her bedroom. He never made her feel like her dreams were too small or too soft or too impractical. He just listened, nodded, and sometimes slipped her an extra $20 with a wink and a whispered, "For the birdseed fund." Sarah begins reading through the will methodically, each bequest delivered with the weight of finality. The hardware store goes to Derek, naturally. He's the one with the business degree, the one who's been working there part-time since high school, the one who understands profit margins and inventory management and customer acquisition strategies. The announcement is met with satisfied nods and a firm handshake between Derek and James, as if they're already planning the expansion they've been discussing for years. Sophia receives the house, the modest two-story where they all grew up, where Christmas mornings unfolded around an artificial tree that Linda bought on clearance in 1987, and where Sunday dinners still happen when everyone can manage to show up. For raising the next generation of Thompsons, the will specifies, and Sophia tears up appropriately, pressing her hand to her heart in a gesture that Maya recognizes from every Hallmark movie she's ever endured. Linda gets the car, Bob's beloved 2018 Honda Accord, that he washed every Saturday morning without fail, and the contents of his workshop, tools accumulated over 40 years of fixing everything that broke in other people's houses, because Bob Thompson was the kind of man who couldn't walk past a broken thing without trying to make it whole again. James receives Bob's collection of vintage fishing gear and the small boat they'd used for weekend trips to Lake Matthews, back when the family still did things together, back before Maya learned that her presence at these gatherings was tolerated rather than welcomed. Maya sits quietly through each announcement, watching her family accept their inheritances with the satisfied air of people receiving exactly what they expected. She begins to wonder if she's misunderstood something fundamental about this gathering. Perhaps she was invited out of courtesy, a final gesture to Bob's memory, rather than any expectation that she'd actually receive anything meaningful. The ceramic dog grows warm against her palm as she traces its familiar edges. She'd given it to Bob for his 70th birthday 2 years ago, along with a card explaining that the dog represented loyalty and protection, and all the things she wished she could offer him in return for his kindness. He'd kept it on his desk at the hardware store, right next to the cash register where everyone could see it. Sarah Mitchell turns a page, adjusts her glasses, and Maya prepares herself for the polite conclusion of the proceedings. She'll congratulate her siblings, help stack the folding chairs, drive back to Portland, and continue the life she's built 2 states away from the people who've never quite figured out how to love her. But Sarah doesn't close the folder. Instead, she looks directly at Maya for the first time since the reading began. "There is one final bequest," she says, her voice carrying a note of something Maya can't quite identify. "To Maya Elena Rodriguez, granddaughter of my heart if not my blood, I leave the sum of $280,000 from my personal savings account, as well as controlling interest in Thompson's Hardware and Garden Center." The silence that follows is so complete that Maya can hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, can hear Derek's sharp intake of breath, can hear the coffee growing cold in Linda's mug as her hand freezes halfway to her mouth. Maya doesn't move. She's learned that moving too quickly in moments like this can shatter whatever fragile magic has.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Allowed her to be seen, to be chosen, to matter. She keeps her eyes on Sarah Mitchell's face, searching for confirmation that she heard correctly, that this isn't some elaborate mistake or cruel joke. Derek stands up so abruptly that his chair tips backward, clattering against the wall. "That's not possible," he says, his voice tight with disbelief. "The business was supposed to come to me. We've been planning this for years." Sophia's face has gone pale, her carefully applied makeup suddenly stark against her skin. Controlling interest, that means she owns more than 50%. That means she owns the business. Linda's coffee mug hits the floor with a sharp crack, sending brown liquid spreading across the hardwood. She doesn't move to clean it up. She just stares at Maya with an expression that Maya has never seen before, something between shock and recognition, and something that might be fear. James opens his mouth, closes it, opens it again like a fish drowning in air. "Sarah, there has to be some mistake. Maya doesn't know anything about running a business. She works with animals. She lives in Oregon. This doesn't make any sense." But Sarah Mitchell's expression doesn't change. She reaches into her briefcase and withdraws a sealed envelope, Maya's name written across the front in Bob's careful handwriting. There's also a letter, she says. Bob specifically requested that it be read aloud if there were any questions about his decision. Maya finally finds her voice, though it comes out smaller than she'd like. Could you read it, please? Sarah breaks the seal and unfolds a single sheet of paper. Bob's handwriting fills the page, the same careful script that labeled everything in his workshop, that wrote birthday cards in blue ink, that left notes on Maya's windshield when she visited. My dear Maya, Sarah begins, and Maya's throat tightens at the familiar endearment. If you're hearing this letter, it means I've done something that probably surprised everyone in that room, including you. I've left you the business and most of my money, and I imagine your family is not taking the news well. Sarah pauses, glances around the room at the stunned faces, then continues. I want you to know that this decision wasn't made lightly or out of sentiment. I've been watching all of you for years, watching how you treat each other, how you treat the people who work for us, how you treat the customers who trust us with their problems. Derek sinks back into his chair, his face flushed with anger and confusion. Sophia wraps her arms around herself as if she's suddenly cold. Linda hasn't moved from her position on the couch, the coffee stains spreading around her feet like evidence of something irrevocably broken. Derek, you're smart and ambitious, but you see customers as profit margins instead of neighbors. Sophia, you have all the social skills in the world, but you've never shown genuine interest in anyone whose success couldn't benefit you somehow. Linda, you raised these children with love, but you also taught them that worth is measured by achievement rather than character. The words hang in the air like accusations, each one finding its target with uncomfortable precision. Maya feels a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow, watching her family confront a version of themselves they've probably never acknowledged. Maya, you've spent your whole life believing you weren't enough for this family, but you've been the only one who understands what I was trying to build. Every time you visited the store, you knew the customers' names, you remembered that Mrs. Chen's arthritis was acting up and helped her carry the heavy bags to her car. You spent your lunch break teaching the Ramirez kids how to identify different types of birdseed because they were starting a backyard nature project. Maya remembers all of these moments, small interactions that felt natural and necessary, but never particularly significant. She hadn't realized that Bob was watching, that he was filing away these gestures as evidence of something larger. You chose a career helping creatures that can't advocate for themselves. You volunteer at the animal rescue every weekend, not because it looks good on a resume, but because you genuinely care about reducing suffering in the world. You send me pictures of every animal you help save, and you always include their names and their stories, because you understand that every life has value. Sarah's voice grows softer as she reads the next paragraph. I know this inheritance will feel overwhelming. You'll probably want to give it back, to insist that you don't deserve it. That impulse is exactly why you do deserve it. You're the only one in this room who's never felt entitled to anything, which makes you the only one I trust with everything. The letter continues, but Maya barely hears the rest. Her mind is spinning backward through years of feeling invisible, years of believing that her choices were somehow lesser, years of wondering why she never seemed to fit into the family narrative that everyone else understood instinctively. She thinks about the time in third grade, when she brought home a report card with all A's except for a B+ in math, and Derek had shaken his head sadly and said, Maya's just not naturally gifted with numbers, like some people. She'd spent the rest of elementary school believing she was bad at math, even though she'd actually been perfectly fine at it. She thinks about high school graduation, when she'd been accepted to Portland Community College with a partial scholarship, and Sophia had announced her acceptance to UCLA the same week. The family celebration had been entirely focused on Sophia's achievement, with Maya's acceptance mentioned only as an afterthought, a nice consolation prize for the family member who wasn't quite bright enough for a real university. She thinks about Christmas 3 years ago, when she'd driven down from Portland with homemade presents for everyone, small ceramic animals she'd crafted in her evening pottery class. Derek had opened his and said, "Oh, a hobby gift, how sweet." He'd set it aside without really looking at it, and Maya had seen him leave it on the kitchen counter when he left the next morning. But she also remembers other moments, quieter ones that she'd almost forgotten. Bob walking her through the hardware store when she was 8 years old, explaining how different tools worked and why people needed them. Bob calling her in college just to ask how her classes were going, genuinely interested in her answers about animal anatomy and veterinary procedures. Bob showing up to her graduation from the vet tech program, the only family member who made the drive to Portland for the ceremony. "The business is yours now," Sarah continues reading from the letter, "but more importantly, the choice is yours. You can sell it, transform it, keep it exactly as it is, or burn it down and start over. I trust your judgment because you're the only one who's ever cared more about doing the right thing than about being right." The letter concludes with a simple signature and a postscript that makes Maya's eyes well up with tears she's been holding back for 26 years. "P.S. I kept the ceramic dog on my desk every day since you gave it to me. It reminded me that the best gifts come from people who understand that love is something you create with your hands and your heart, not something you buy or inherit or demand." Sarah folds the letter carefully and places it on the table in front of Maya. The room remains silent except for the grandfather clock and the sound of Linda finally moving to clean up the spilled coffee, her movements mechanical and detached. Maya picks up the letter, holds it against her chest like a shield against the waves of shock and resentment she can feel radiating from her family. She looks around the room at these people who've shaped her entire understanding of her own worth, and for the first time in her life, she sees them clearly. They're not villains. They're not monsters. They're just people who learn to love conditionally, people who confused achievement with character, people who never learned to see past their own reflections long enough to recognize the quiet strength that had been sitting in their living room all along. Derek's face has turned an alarming shade of red, the kind of flush that spreads from his collar up to his hairline when he's about to lose his temper. Maya has seen this progression countless times over the years, usually directed at customer service representatives or restaurant servers who move too slowly for his liking. Now it's aimed squarely at her, and she feels herself shrinking instinctively before catching herself and straightening her shoulders. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Derek says, his voice rising with each word. "Maya doesn't know the first thing about running a hardware store. She's been gone for 8 years. 8 years, Sarah. She comes down here maybe twice a year for holidays, if that. How is she supposed to manage inventory? How is she supposed to handle vendor relationships? How is she supposed to make payroll decisions?" His questions hang in the air like accusations, each one designed to highlight Maya's inadequacy, to expose the obvious mistake that Bob must have made in his final months. Maya feels the familiar weight of proving herself settling on her shoulders, the exhausting burden of justifying her existence to people who've already decided she doesn't measure up. But before she can respond, Sarah Mitchell removes another document from her briefcase, this one bearing official letterhead and multiple signatures. "Actually, Derek, your grandfather anticipated these concerns. Maya has been listed as a silent partner in Thompson's Hardware and Garden Center for the past 18 months. She's been receiving monthly financial reports and has been consulted on major business decisions during that time." The statement hits the room like a physical blow. Sophia's mouth falls open in a way that would be comical if the situation weren't so tense. James makes a sound somewhere between a cough and a gasp. Linda, who has finished cleaning up the coffee and returned to her spot on the couch, simply stares at Maya as if seeing her for the first time. Maya herself feels dizzy with surprise. She thinks back over the past year and a half, trying to remember any communication from Bob that might have hinted at this arrangement. Then it hits her like a puzzle piece sliding into place. The phone calls that came every few weeks, always on Sunday evenings when she was usually home from her volunteer shift at the animal rescue. Bob would ask about her work, about the animals she was treating, about her life in Portland, but he'd also ask seemingly casual questions about business. What did she think about the trend toward organic gardening supplies? Had she noticed more people in Portland shopping at small local businesses instead of big box stores? Did her veterinary clinic have trouble finding reliable suppliers, and what made the difference between vendors they trusted and ones they avoided? At the time, she'd assumed he was just making conversation, genuinely interested in her perspective but not necessarily seeking her advice for any particular purpose. Now she realizes that those conversations were business consultations disguised as family check-ins. Bob had been picking her brain about market trends, customer service approaches, and operational efficiency without ever making her feel like she was being tested or evaluated. He'd simply treated her insights as valuable and worth seeking out, a radical departure from how the rest of the family had always approached her opinions. The organic gardening expansion that increased revenue by 32% last year. Sarah continues, consulting her notes, that was Maya's suggestion. The new customer loyalty program that's brought in over 40 new regular customers, also Maya's idea. The partnership with the animal rescue that's generated significant positive community relations, Maya's initiative. Derek's face transitions from red to pale, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles have gone white. That's impossible. I've been managing the day-to-day operations. I would have known if major decisions were being influenced by someone who doesn't even live here. Sarah's expression remains neutral, professional, but Maya catches a hint of something that might be satisfaction in her eyes. Bob was very careful about how he implemented Maya's suggestions. He wanted to see how they performed before revealing their source. He also wanted to see how the family would react to changes that improved the business, but didn't fit your established patterns. The lawyer pulls out a thick folder filled with what appear to be financial reports and correspondence. Maya, your grandfather wanted you to have these records so you could see the full scope of your contributions over the past 18 months. He was particularly proud of the partnership with Pacific Northwest Animal Rescue. The supplies you helped them procure through the store's vendor relationships saved them over $15,000 last year, and the positive publicity generated enough new customers to offset the discount you negotiated for them. Maya remembers that partnership clearly now. She'd mentioned to Bob during one of their Sunday calls that the animal rescue was struggling to afford the specialized equipment they needed for wildlife rehabilitation. She'd expected sympathy, maybe a small personal donation like the ones he'd occasionally made to causes she cared about. Instead, Bob had asked detailed questions about what supplies they needed, which vendors might carry them, and what kind of pricing would make the difference between the rescue thriving and merely surviving. 3 weeks later, the rescue director had called Maya in tears of gratitude. Someone had arranged for Thompson's Hardware to become a supplier for all their non-medical needs at cost plus 10%, barely enough markup to cover the store's overhead. The director had praised Maya's family for their community spirit and their commitment to supporting local nonprofits, and Maya had accepted the thanks while privately wondering how Bob had managed to make it happen so quickly. Now she understands. Bob hadn't just facilitated the partnership, he'd structured it as a business development strategy. The rescue's volunteers and supporters became customers, drawn by the knowledge that shopping at Thompson's directly supported animal welfare in their community. The story spread through social media and local newspapers, generating exactly the kind of authentic positive publicity that money can't buy. The rescue partnership alone brought in an estimated 68 new customers in its first year. Sarah continues, average purchase per visit is $87, with most customers returning monthly. The lifetime value of those relationships is projected at over $200,000. Sophia finally finds her voice, though it comes out thinner than usual. So Maya has been secretly running the business from Portland this whole time. That doesn't seem fair to Derek, who's been there every day dealing with actual customers and actual problems. There's something in Sophia's tone that Maya recognizes, a carefully modulated blend of confusion and accusation that's designed to make Maya feel guilty for succeeding in a way that disadvantages someone else. It's the same tone Sophia used when Maya got the lead in the high school play that Sophia had wanted, or when Maya received a scholarship that Sophia thought should have gone to someone more deserving. Maya looks at her sister, really looks at her, and sees something she'd never noticed before. Behind Sophia's perfectly applied makeup and carefully styled hair, behind the confident posture and professional demeanor, there's something that looks almost like panic. Sophia has built her entire identity around being the successful one, the one who makes smart choices and gets rewarded for them. Maya's sudden elevation to business owner threatens that narrative in ways that go far beyond money or property. I wasn't running anything, Maya says quietly, her voice steadier than she expected. I was just answering Grandpa's questions honestly. I didn't know he was consulting me about business decisions. I thought we were just talking. Derek laughs, but there's no humor in it, right? You just happen to suggest million-dollar ideas during casual conversation. That's convenient. The skepticism in his voice triggers something in Maya that she's kept buried for years, a spark of anger that she's always smothered before it could grow into flame. She thinks about all the times Derek has dismissed her opinions as naive or impractical, all the times he's explained basic concepts to her, as if she were a child, all the times he's made it clear that her perspective was welcome only when it aligned with his existing beliefs. Actually, Derek, yes, that's exactly what happened. Grandpa asked me what I thought, and I told him. He listened to my answers like they mattered, which was apparently a novel experience in this family. The words come out sharper than Maya intended, carrying years of accumulated frustration that she's never allowed herself to express. The room falls silent again, but this time the silence feels different, charged with tensions that have been building for decades. Maya can feel the weight of everyone's attention focused on her, waiting to see what she'll do with this unexpected power, this sudden reversal of everything they thought they knew about the family hierarchy. Linda speaks for the first time since the coffee spill, her voice carefully controlled but carrying an undertone that Maya can't quite identify. Maya, honey, I think everyone's just surprised. We all loved your grandfather very much, and we want to honor his wishes, but this is a lot to process. Maybe we should talk about what's best for everyone involved. There it is, Maya thinks. The careful manipulation disguised as concern, the suggestion that Maya should consider what's best for everyone, rather than what's best for herself. It's the same strategy Linda has used for years to manage family conflicts, to convince whoever holds the inconvenient position that they should sacrifice their interests for the sake of family harmony. Maya has fallen for this approach countless times over the years. When Derek wanted to use Maya's college fund to help with his business school expenses because his needs were more urgent. When Sophia needed Maya to skip her high school graduation party to babysit Sophia's boyfriend's kids because family responsibilities come first. When James suggested that Maya should consider a more practical career path because following dreams was a luxury the family couldn't afford. Each time, Maya had convinced herself that giving in was the mature thing to do, the loving thing to do, the right thing to do. She'd told herself that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for herself, that her family's approval was worth more than her own desires, that being needed was better than being respected. But sitting here in Bob's living room, holding his letter in her hands, Maya finally understands what her grandfather had been trying to teach her through those Sunday phone calls. He hadn't been seeking her business advice because she was particularly brilliant or insightful. He'd been showing her that her thoughts and opinions had value, that her perspective was worth seeking out, that she didn't need to diminish herself to make other people comfortable. I appreciate everyone's concern, Maya says, her voice growing stronger with each word, but I don't think we need to talk about what's best for everyone involved.
Grandpa already made that decision. He spent 18 months evaluating my judgment and my contributions, and he decided to trust me with his life's work. I'm going to honor that trust. Derek stands up again, this time more slowly, his movements deliberate and threatening. You're making a huge mistake, Maya. You live 800 miles away. You don't understand this community or these customers or this industry. You're going to run the business into the ground within a year. And then what? Then we'll all suffer because you were too stubborn to admit you're in over your head. The threat is subtle but unmistakable. Derek isn't just questioning Maya's competence, he's predicting her failure and positioning himself as the voice of reason, who tried to prevent the inevitable disaster. It's a masterful piece of manipulation, designed to make Maya doubt herself, while giving Derek plausible deniability about his motives. Maya feels the familiar urge to apologize, to backtrack, to find a compromise that will make everyone happy even if it makes her miserable. The urge is so strong that she actually opens her mouth to suggest that maybe Derek could continue managing the day-to-day operations while she handles the partnership responsibilities from Portland. But then she looks down at Bob's letter, still clutched in her hands, and she remembers his words about trusting her judgment precisely because she'd never felt entitled to anything. She thinks about the ceramic dog on his desk, the reminder that love is something you create with your hands and your heart, not something you buy or inherit or demand. "You're right about one thing, Derek," Maya says, folding the letter carefully and placing it in her purse. "I don't understand this community the way you do, but I understand something else. I understand what it feels like to be overlooked and underestimated. I understand what it means to need help and not know where to find it. I understand what it's like to have people assume you don't matter." She stands up, smoothing down her simple black dress, her fingers finding the ceramic dog necklace one more time. Those aren't weaknesses in a business owner. Those are superpowers, because when you know what it feels like to be invisible, you notice other invisible people. When you know what it means to struggle, you find ways to help other people who are struggling. When you understand that everyone has value, even when they can't prove it, you build the kind of business that people trust and support and recommend to their friends. The words flow out of her with a confidence that surprises everyone in the room, including herself. She's never spoken to her family this way before, never claimed this kind of authority, or asserted this kind of vision. But she's also never had 18 months of secretly successful business consulting to back up her claims, never had a grandfather's letter proving that her insights were not only valid, but profitable. Sophia shifts uncomfortably in her chair, her professional composure beginning to crack around the edges. "Maya, you're being emotional about this. Business decisions shouldn't be based on feelings or personal philosophy, they should be based on data and experience and proven track records." "You mean like the data showing that my suggestions increased revenue by 32%, or the experience I gained from 18 months of successful consulting? Or the proven track record of bringing in 68 new customers and generating over $200,000 in projected lifetime value?" Maya's voice remains calm, but there's steel underneath the softness now. She looks around the room at her family, these people who have shaped her understanding of herself for 26 years, and she sees them clearly for perhaps the first time in her life. They're not bad people, but they're limited people, trapped in their own assumptions about worth and value and success. They've spent so long believing that Maya was the weak link, the family member who needed protection and guidance, and careful management, that they can't process evidence to the contrary. "I know this is hard for all of you," Maya continues, her voice gentler now but still firm. "You've spent years assuming that I was the one who didn't understand how the world works. But maybe the problem wasn't that I didn't understand. Maybe the problem was that I understood something different." Sarah Mitchell begins gathering her papers, clearly sensing that the formal portion of the proceedings is complete. "Maya, you'll need to come by my office this week to sign the transfer documents and review the business accounts. I'll also need to walk you through the tax implications and the legal responsibilities that come with business ownership." "Of course," Maya replies, then turns back to her family. "I want you all to know that I don't plan to make dramatic changes overnight. The business is successful because Grandpa built it carefully over many years. I'm not interested in destroying what he created, or in punishing anyone for underestimating me. Relief flickers across Derek's face, but Maya isn't finished. However, I am interested in expanding the vision to include more of what I learned from him, more partnerships with local nonprofits, more support for customers who are struggling financially, more community involvement, and more commitment to the idea that a business should serve the people around it, not just the people who own it. The relief on Derek's face transforms back into concern, and Maya realizes that her vision of the business threatens him in ways that pure ownership never could. Derek has always seen Thompson's Hardware as a stepping stone to bigger things, a small-town business that could be optimized and expanded, and eventually sold to a larger chain for maximum profit. Maya's approach suggests a different definition of success entirely, one that prioritizes community impact over financial growth. James speaks up for the first time since the letter was read, his voice careful and measured. Maya, what about Derek's job? He's been planning to take over the business for years. His whole career path has been built around that expectation. It's a fair question, and Maya appreciates that James is asking it directly rather than through manipulation or emotional pressure. Derek has indeed structured his life around the assumption that he would inherit the business, and Maya's sudden ownership does disrupt those plans in significant ways. Derek will always have a place at Thompson's Hardware if he wants it, Maya says. His experience and his relationships with vendors and his understanding of daily operations are valuable assets, but the business will be run according to my vision and my values, not his. If he can work within that framework, I'd welcome his partnership. If he can't, I'll understand and I'll help him transition to something that's a better fit. Derek's jaw tightens, and Maya can see him processing the implications of her offer. She's essentially proposing that he work for her, that he accept her authority and adapt to her leadership style, that he abandon his own plans for the business in favor of hers. For someone who has spent years preparing to be the boss, the prospect of becoming an employee under his previously overlooked sister represents a fundamental shift in identity. I need time to think about this, Derek says finally. This whole situation is insane, and I'm not making any decisions while everyone's emotional and confused. That's completely reasonable, Maya replies. Take all the time you need. But I'll be moving forward with the transition regardless of what you decide. The business can't wait for family dynamics to sort themselves out. Linda stands up abruptly, smoothing down her skirt with nervous energy. I think we've all heard enough for one day. This is a lot to process, and emotions are running high. Maybe we should take a break and reconvene when everyone has had a chance to think things through. Maya recognizes the suggestion for what it is, an attempt to regain control of a situation that has spiraled beyond Linda's ability to manage through her usual strategies. Linda has spent decades orchestrating family interactions, determining when conversations should begin and end, deciding which topics are appropriate for discussion and which should be tabled indefinitely. But Maya is no longer a participant in Linda's carefully choreographed family dynamic. She's the owner of the business that employs Derek and generates income that supports multiple family members. She's the beneficiary of Bob's trust and the recipient of his confidence. She's no longer the person who can be sent to her room when the conversation becomes inconvenient. Actually, Linda, I think we should finish this conversation now, Maya says. I'm driving back to Portland tomorrow morning, and I want everyone to understand the situation clearly before I leave. The statement hangs in the air like a declaration of independence. Maya is setting the terms of engagement, determining the timeline, asserting her right to control the conversation that centers on her inheritance and her decisions. For a family accustomed to treating Maya as someone whose preferences were optional, this represents a seismic shift in power dynamics. Sophia clears her throat, her banker's instincts apparently kicking in as she processes the financial implications of Maya's inheritance. Can we talk about the practical aspects of this transition? The business bank accounts, the vendor relationships, the employee contracts. These aren't things that can be managed remotely. Maya, someone needs to be physically present to handle daily operations. It's a valid concern, and Maya appreciates that Sophia is approaching the situation from a problem-solving perspective, rather than an emotional one. Managing a hardware store from 800 miles away would indeed present logistical challenges that need to be addressed systematically. I've already thought about that, Maya says, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. I'm planning to relocate back to Riverside within the next 2 months. I've spoken with my supervisor at the veterinary clinic about transferring to a practice here, and there are several options that would allow me to maintain my career while taking on business ownership responsibilities. The announcement clearly shocks everyone in the room. Maya herself is somewhat surprised by the certainty with which she's stated her plans, since she's only been seriously considering the relocation possibility for about 20 minutes. But as she speaks the words aloud, they feel right in a way that few decisions in her life ever have. Derek's face goes through another series of color changes as he processes the implications of Maya's move. If she's living in Riverside and actively involved in daily operations, his role in the business becomes much more uncertain. He can't position himself as the indispensable local representative if Maya is handling that function herself. You're going to give up your life in Portland just like that? Sophia asks, genuine bewilderment in her voice. You've built a whole life there. Your job, your friends, your volunteer work. You're going to abandon all of that to move back here and run a hardware store. The question reveals something fundamental about how Sophia views Maya's life in Portland. To Sophia, Maya's career as a veterinary technician isn't a profession, it's just a job. Maya's volunteer work with the animal rescue isn't a calling, it's just a hobby. Maya's carefully constructed independent life isn't an achievement, it's just a temporary arrangement that can be discarded when something more important comes along. But Maya doesn't see the relocation as abandoning her life. She sees it as expanding her life, as taking on new challenges and responsibilities that build on the foundation she's already created. Her experience with animal care will translate directly to managing the garden center's livestock and pet supply sections. Her volunteer work has taught her about nonprofit partnerships and community outreach. Her years of living independently have prepared her for the autonomy and decision-making authority that business ownership requires. I'm not abandoning anything, Maya says. I'm integrating everything I've learned into something bigger. The business already has partnerships with animal-related organizations because of my connections. There's no reason that can't expand to include veterinary clinics, pet groomers, boarding facilities, training programs. Thompson's Hardware could become a community hub for pet owners and animal lovers, not just a place to buy tools and garden supplies. As Maya speaks, she can see the vision taking shape in her mind. The store's back room could host pet first aid classes taught by local veterinarians. The parking lot could accommodate mobile adoption events organized by area rescues. The garden center could dedicate space to plants that are safe for pets, with educational materials about creating animal-friendly landscapes. The integration possibilities are endless, and Maya realizes that Bob might have seen these connections long before she did. His questions during their Sunday phone calls weren't just about business strategy in general, they were specifically about the intersection between her animal care expertise and the hardware store's customer base.
He'd been helping her prepare for this opportunity without either of them explicitly acknowledging what was happening. James looks at his daughter with something that might be respect, though it's hard to tell since Maya has so little experience with that particular expression from him. You've really thought this through, haven't you? This isn't just an emotional reaction to getting the inheritance. I've been thinking about it for exactly as long as I've known about it, Maya admits. But thinking fast doesn't mean thinking poorly. Sometimes when the right opportunity appears, you know it immediately. Derek makes a sound that's somewhere between a laugh and a groan. The right opportunity. Maya, you realize that running a business isn't like working at an animal clinic. Right, you can't just carry your way to success. There are budgets and regulations and competition and 1,000 things that can go wrong every single day. Maya turns to look at Derek directly, and for the first time in their shared history, she doesn't feel intimidated by his skepticism or diminished by his condescension. You're absolutely right, Derek. Running a business is complicated and challenging and sometimes overwhelming. But caring isn't a weakness in business, it's a competitive advantage. Customers can tell the difference between businesses that see them as profit centers and businesses that see them as people. She pulls out her phone and scrolls through her photos until she finds the one she's looking for. This is Mrs. Patterson, she says, showing the screen to the room. The photo shows an elderly woman in a wheelchair, smiling broadly while holding a small tabby kitten. She comes into the vet clinic every month for her cat's arthritis medication. Last time she was there, she mentioned that she was having trouble maintaining her garden because she couldn't lift the heavy bags of soil and fertilizer anymore. Maya swipes to the next photo, which shows the same woman standing proudly next to a thriving container garden on what appears to be an apartment balcony. I called Thompson's Hardware and arranged for them to deliver lightweight potting supplies and set up a container gardening system that she could maintain from her wheelchair. The total sale was maybe $60, but Mrs. Patterson has told that story to everyone she knows. She's brought in at least 5 new customers, just through word of mouth. Derek shifts uncomfortably in his chair. Maya knows he remembers the Mrs. Patterson delivery because he'd complained about it during one of Bob's staff meetings. Derek had seen it as an inefficient use of delivery resources for a minimal profit margin, a favor that set a bad precedent about custom services that the business couldn't afford to provide to every customer. But Bob had supported the delivery, and now Maya understands why. The $60 sale was never the point. The point was demonstrating that Thompson's Hardware was the kind of business that cared about customers as people, that would go out of their way to solve problems even when the immediate financial return was minimal. That's one customer, Derek says defensively. You can't run a business based on isolated feel-good stories. You need consistent revenue streams and efficient operations and scalable systems. You're right again, Maya agrees. But you also need customers who trust you and recommend you and choose to support you even when they have other options. Mrs. Patterson represents something valuable that doesn't show up on financial reports. She represents the difference between a hardware store and a community resource. Sarah Mitchell finishes packing her briefcase and stands to leave, clearly sensing that the family conversation has moved beyond the scope of legal proceedings. Maya, I'll have the transition documents ready by Wednesday. We can schedule an appointment to review everything and begin the formal transfer process. Thank you, Sarah. I'll call your office tomorrow to set that up. After the lawyer leaves, the room feels smaller somehow, more intimate and more tense. Without the professional mediation of Sarah's presence, the family dynamics reassert themselves more directly. Maya can feel the weight of expectations and assumptions and long-established patterns pressing down on her, trying to force her back into the familiar role of the accommodating younger sister who defers to everyone else's expertise. Linda attempts to reassert control through the offer of hospitality.
Well, since we're all here, why don't I make some dinner? We can continue this conversation over a proper meal, like a family. The suggestion carries multiple layers of meaning. Food as comfort, food as distraction, food as an excuse to move the conversation to Linda's territory, where she can control the environment and the pace. Maya has seen this strategy employed countless times over the years, usually when someone in the family was upset or making decisions that Linda preferred to redirect. But Maya is no longer a child who can be managed through the promise of her favorite meal or the comfort of familiar routines. She's a 26-year-old woman who has been living independently for 8 years, who has been secretly consulting on business decisions for 18 months, who has just inherited a significant amount of money and property and responsibility. Actually, Linda, I think I'm going to head back to my hotel, Maya says. I have some phone calls to make tonight, and I want to start early tomorrow morning with the drive back to Portland. The refusal of Linda's hospitality represents another small revolution in family dynamics. Maya is choosing her own timeline, her own priorities, her own definition of what constitutes appropriate family behavior. She's not being rude or hostile, but she's also not subordinating her needs to the family's preference for extended processing and discussion. Derek stands up, his frustration finally boiling over into direct confrontation. So that's it. You're just going to waltz in here, collect your inheritance, announce that you're taking over everything, and then disappear back to Portland without any real discussion about how this affects the rest of us. Maya recognizes the emotional manipulation in Derek's question, the way he's framing her reasonable boundary setting as selfish abandonment. It's the same tactic he used when they were children, and Maya would resist his efforts to control shared activities or family games. He would accuse her of being unfair or mean when she didn't automatically defer to his preferences. Derek, we just spent 2 hours discussing exactly how this affects everyone. I've answered your questions about my qualifications, my plans, and my vision for the business. I've offered you a continuing role if you want it, and I've given you time to think about whether that works for you. I'm not sure what additional discussion you're expecting. I'm expecting some acknowledgement that this decision affects more people than just you. Derek shoots back. I'm expecting some recognition that maybe, just maybe, Grandpa made a mistake, and we should figure out how to fix it instead of blindly following the wishes of an old man who wasn't thinking clearly in his final months. The accusation hangs in the air like a slap. Derek is suggesting that Bob was mentally incompetent when he made his final will, that his decision to trust Maya was the product of diminished capacity rather than careful observation and deliberate choice. It's a strategy designed to invalidate Maya's inheritance without directly attacking her worthiness, a way of suggesting that the whole situation is the result of an elderly man's confusion rather than Derek's own limitations. Maya feels anger rising in her chest, hot and unfamiliar and stronger than anything she's allowed herself to feel toward her family in years. The anger isn't just about Derek's insult to Bob's memory, though that's certainly part of it. The anger is about 26 years of being told that her perspectives were naive, her dreams were impractical, her contributions were minimal, her very presence was somehow insufficient. Grandpa wasn't confused, Derek. He was paying attention. For 18 months, he watched you manage daily operations while I consulted on strategic decisions. He saw which approach generated better results. He saw which one of us understood the difference between running a business and serving a community. He saw which one of us was capable of growth, and which one was stuck in patterns that weren't working. Maya's voice grows stronger as she speaks, fueled by years of suppressed frustration and the sudden recognition of her own worth. You want to talk about mistakes? Let's talk about the customer complaints that Bob showed me from the past 2 years. Let's talk about the vendor relationships that have deteriorated because of your aggressive negotiation tactics. Let's talk about the employee turnover rate and the community feedback and the gradual decline in customer loyalty that Bob was worried about. Derek's face goes pale, and Maya realizes that she's touched on something he probably thought Bob hadn't noticed or hadn't cared about. The daily operational details that Derek prided himself on managing efficiently had actually been concerns that Bob was quietly monitoring and trying to address through Maya's strategic suggestions. That's not fair, Derek says, but his voice lacks its earlier conviction. Every business has challenges. Every manager has to make difficult decisions. You can't judge my performance based on isolated complaints or temporary setbacks. You're right, Maya agrees, but I can judge it based on overall trends and customer feedback and financial performance. And based on those metrics, Grandpa decided that the business needed a different kind of leadership. Leadership that prioritizes relationships over transactions, that sees challenges as opportunities for creativity rather than obstacles to efficiency. Sophia finally speaks up, her banker's training apparently helping her process the business implications more clearly than the emotional ones. Maya, if what you're saying is true, if Derek's management style was actually causing problems, then maybe this inheritance makes more sense than we initially thought. But that doesn't mean you're automatically qualified to do better. Good diagnosis doesn't guarantee good treatment. It's a fair point, and Maya appreciates that Sophia is engaging with the substance of the situation, rather than just the emotional shock of it. Maya has identified problems with Derek's approach, but that doesn't necessarily prove that her approach will be more successful. You're absolutely right, Sophia. I might fail completely. I might make decisions that hurt the business, or alienate customers, or drive away employees. But I might also succeed in ways that Derek never could, precisely because I approach problems differently than he does. Maya looks around the room at her family, these people who have shaped her understanding of herself for so long, and she feels something shifting inside her. Not anger anymore, but something closer to clarity, a recognition of who she is, and who she's always been underneath their assumptions and expectations. The truth is, I've been underestimating myself for as long as you've been underestimating me. I've been so focused on proving that I belonged in this family, that I never stopped to consider whether this family deserved to have me in it. Grandpa saw that. He saw that I was diminishing myself to make other people comfortable, and he left me the tools to stop doing that. The words surprise Maya even as she speaks them. She hadn't consciously realized that she'd been making herself smaller to fit into spaces that were too narrow for her actual capabilities and interests. She'd been so accustomed to being the family member who needed guidance and protection that she'd never considered the possibility that she might be the family member with the clearest vision and the strongest foundation. Linda, who has been unusually quiet during this exchange, finally speaks up with the kind of careful tone she uses when she's trying to diffuse tension without taking sides. Maya, honey, I think we're all just trying to understand what's best for everyone involved. Your grandfather loved you very much, and he clearly wanted to provide for you, but that doesn't mean you have to take on responsibilities that might be overwhelming or stressful. There it is again, Maya thinks. The suggestion that she should consider what's best for everyone, rather than what's best for herself. The implication that accepting her inheritance and claiming her rightful place in the family business might be too much for her to handle, too stressful for her delicate constitution, too overwhelming for her limited experience. Maya has been hearing variations of this message her entire life: too sensitive for competitive sports, too impractical for business classes, too naive for serious relationships, too idealistic for real-world success. Always too something or not enough something else, always requiring protection from challenges that everyone else assumes she can't handle. But Maya isn't the same person who accepted those limitations as truth. 8 years of independent living, 18 months of successful business consulting, and one inheritance that proves her grandfather's confidence in her judgment have combined to create a new understanding of her own capabilities. Linda, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not a child anymore.
I'm not someone who needs to be protected from difficult decisions or challenging responsibilities. I'm someone who has been making good decisions and handling responsibilities successfully for years, even when nobody in this family was paying attention to it. Maya stands up, smoothing down her dress one final time, her fingers finding the ceramic dog necklace that has become a talisman of sorts. I'm going to take the inheritance that Grandpa left me, and I'm going to honor his trust by running the business according to my values and my vision. If that makes some of you uncomfortable, I understand, but I'm not going to make myself smaller just to make you feel better about your assumptions. She picks up her purse, checks to make sure Bob's letter is still safely tucked inside, and heads toward the door. Behind her, she can hear the murmur of voices as her family
begins to process what has just happened, to figure out how to respond to this new version of Maya who refuses to be managed or diminished. At the door, Maya turns back one last time. Derek, I meant what I said about there being a place for you at the business if you want it. But it would have to be on my terms, working toward my vision of what Thompson's hardware can become. If you can't accept that, I'll understand, and I'll help you find something that's a better fit. Maya drives through the quiet streets of Riverside in her 10-year-old Honda Civic, the windows rolled down to let in the warm evening air that carries the scent of jasmine and freshly watered lawns. The familiar neighborhoods look different somehow, viewed through the lens of her new reality as a business owner and property inheritor rather than the visiting granddaughter who never quite belonged. She passes the elementary school where she learned to read, the park where she used to feed ducks with stale bread from Bob's kitchen, the corner market where she bought candy with quarters Bob would slip her when Linda wasn't looking. Every landmark holds memories of feeling like an outsider looking in, of wondering why she never seemed to fit the mold that came so naturally to Derek and Sophia. Now those same locations feel like puzzle pieces clicking into place, creating a picture she'd never been able to see clearly before. Bob hadn't been absent from her childhood, he'd been present in ways that everyone else had overlooked. The quarters for candy were lessons in generosity, the walks through the hardware store were apprenticeships disguised as quality time. The patient answers to her endless questions about how things worked were foundational education for someone he already saw as his eventual successor. Maya pulls into the parking lot of the Budget Inn where she'd made a reservation that morning, back when she thought she'd be driving home tomorrow empty-handed except for whatever small keepsake Bob might have left her. The motel is clean but basic, the kind of place that caters to traveling salespeople and families visiting relatives who don't have guest rooms. 3 hours ago she'd chosen it because it was affordable and close to the highway. Now she could afford to stay anywhere she wanted, but the modest room somehow feels appropriate for this transitional moment between her old life and whatever comes next. In her room, Maya sits on the edge of the bed and pulls out her phone to call her best friend Jessica, a fellow veterinary technician who has become Maya's primary confidant over the years. Jessica answers on the second ring, her voice bright with curiosity about how the will reading went. So how bad was it? Did they leave you Bob's old fishing tackle and call it even? Jessica's tone is joking, but Maya knows there's genuine concern underneath the humor. Jessica has heard years of stories about Maya's complicated relationship with her family, their casual dismissiveness, their inability to see Maya's worth. "Jess, you're not going to believe this," Maya begins, and then proceeds to recount the entire afternoon, from the wobbly chair by the piano, to Derek's accusations of mental incompetence to her own declaration of independence. Jessica listens without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of surprise or encouragement. When Maya finishes, Jessica is quiet for a long moment. Then she lets out a low whistle. "Maya Rodriguez, secret business consultant and surprise heiress. I have to say, I did not see that plot twist coming." "Neither did I," Maya admits. "Jess, what if I'm completely deluding myself? What if Derek is right and I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm about to destroy everything Bob spent his life building?" Jessica's response is immediate and fierce. "Maya, stop. Do you remember what you told me last month about the Morrison account at the clinic? How Dr. Williams was ready to write off their dog's treatment as too expensive, but you figured out a payment plan and an alternative medication protocol that saved them $3,000 and probably saved their pet's life. Maya remembers. The Morrisons were a young couple with 3 kids and a golden retriever who'd been hit by a car. The surgery and recovery costs would have been prohibitive, but Maya had researched less expensive treatment options and worked with Dr. Williams to create a plan that addressed the dog's needs within the family's financial constraints. That's not the same thing as running a business. Maya protests. It's exactly the same thing as running a business, Jessica counters. It's seeing a problem that other people want to give up on and finding a creative solution that works for everyone involved. It's caring enough about the outcome to do extra work that nobody asked you to do. It's understanding that success isn't just about the immediate transaction, it's about building relationships and trust and long-term value. Maya feels some of the tension in her shoulders beginning to relax. Jessica has a way of reflecting Maya's actions back to her in language that helps Maya recognize her own competence, her own worth, her own track record of making good decisions under pressure. Besides, Jessica continues, your grandfather spent 18 months testing
Your business judgment.
18 months, Maya. That's not a whim or a sentimental gesture. That's a comprehensive evaluation by someone who understood both you and the business better than anyone else. After they hang up, Maya sits in the quiet motel room and tries to process the magnitude of what has happened. This morning she was a veterinary technician living paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment in Portland, driving a car that needed new tires and worrying about student loan payments. Tonight she's the owner of a successful business and a substantial bank account, faced with decisions that will affect not just her own future but the livelihoods of employees and the economic health of a community. The responsibility feels enormous, but not overwhelming. Instead, it feels like finally being given the tools to do work that actually matters, work that aligns with her values and utilizes her skills and creates the kind of positive impact she's always wanted to have on the world around her. Maya pulls out her laptop and begins researching veterinary clinics in the Riverside area, looking for practices that might have openings for an experienced technician with specialized wildlife rehabilitation experience. She finds 3 possibilities that look promising, all of them with positive online reviews and community involvement that suggests they share her approach to animal care as both a profession and a calling. She drafts emails to each clinic, explaining her situation and her timeline for relocating, attaching her resume and references from the Portland practice, where she's worked for the past 4 years. The process feels surreal, making concrete plans based on a decision she made less than 6 hours ago, but it also feels right in a way that few decisions in her life have. As she's finishing the 3rd email, her phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number. When she opens it, she recognizes Derek's cell phone number, though they've rarely communicated directly over the years. Maya, I've been thinking about our conversation today. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Would you be willing to meet for breakfast tomorrow morning before you drive back to Portland? I think we should talk more about how to make this transition work for everyone. Maya stares at the message for several minutes, trying to read between the lines. Derek's tone is conciliatory, almost apologetic, very different from his confrontational stance during the will reading. But Maya has learned to be cautious about sudden changes in her family's behavior, especially when those changes coincide with shifts in power dynamics. She remembers the Christmas when she was 16 and had saved up enough money from her part-time job to buy everyone thoughtful presents. For the first time in years, she'd felt like she was contributing something meaningful to the family celebration. Derek and Sophia had been unusually warm and inclusive that day, inviting her to join their inside jokes and asking her opinion about their college plans.
Maya had been so grateful for the acceptance that she'd almost missed the fact that they were both angling for loans to help with their spring break trips. Derek needed $300 for a ski trip with his fraternity, and Sophia wanted $400 for a beach vacation with her sorority sisters. They'd made their requests casually, affectionately, as if the money were just a natural extension of the family bonding they'd been cultivating all day. Maya had given them both the money, despite the fact that it represented most of her savings and meant she couldn't afford the art supplies she'd been planning to buy for her photography class. She'd told herself that this was what family meant, that supporting each other's dreams was more important than pursuing her own interests. Neither Derek nor Sophia had paid her back, despite multiple promises to do so. By February, they'd both stopped mentioning the debt entirely, and Maya had learned not to bring it up, because it made family gatherings awkward and uncomfortable. Now reading Derek's text message, Maya wonders if she's seeing the beginning of a similar pattern. Derek's sudden willingness to discuss cooperation and transition planning might be genuine, or it might be a strategic attempt to regain influence over decisions that he can no longer control directly. Maya types and deletes several responses before settling on something that's polite but non-committal. I appreciate the offer, Derek, but I have an early morning meeting with Sarah Mitchell to start the paperwork process. Maybe we can talk more after I've had a chance to review the business records in detail. It's not entirely true about the early morning meeting, but it's not entirely false either. Maya does plan to call Sarah's office first thing in the morning to schedule an appointment, and she does want to review the financial documents before making any commitments about Derek's future role in the business. More importantly, Maya realizes that she doesn't want to have this conversation with Derek until she's had time to develop her own vision for the business independent of his input or influence. She's spent too many years allowing other people to shape her decisions through their expectations and assumptions. This time, she wants to know what she thinks before she finds out what everyone else thinks she should think. Her phone buzzes again, this time with a text from Sophia. Maya, I know today was overwhelming for everyone. I was thinking it might help if I put together some financial projections and business analysis for you to review. I have experience with small business banking, and I could help you understand the implications of different strategic decisions. Maya appreciates that Sophia's offer is more professional and less emotionally manipulative than Derek's, but she's still wary of accepting help that comes with strings attached. Sophia's banking experience would indeed be valuable, but it would also give Sophia significant influence over Maya's understanding of the business and her options for managing it. Maya responds with polite thanks and a promise to consider the offer after she's had time to review the existing records with Sarah Mitchell. She's not rejecting Sophia's help outright, but she's also not accepting it immediately, giving herself space to determine whether the assistance would be genuinely helpful or subtly controlling. The third text comes from Linda, and it's longer than the others. Maya, honey, I hope you understand that everyone's reaction today came from a place of surprise rather than disapproval. We all love you very much, and we want to support you in whatever way would be most helpful. I was thinking that maybe you could come for Sunday dinner this week so we can discuss this situation as a family, without the stress and emotion of today's formal proceedings. I could make your favorite lasagna, and we could just talk through everything calmly and rationally. Maya recognizes Linda's strategy immediately. The family dinner invitation is designed to move the conversation back to Linda's territory, where she can control the environment and the emotional tone. The mention of Maya's favorite meal is a reminder of childhood comfort and family connection, an appeal to nostalgia and belonging that's meant to soften Maya's resistance to family input. But Maya also recognizes something else in Linda's message, something that might be genuine concern, mixed with the manipulation. Linda has spent years managing family dynamics and smoothing over conflicts, and Maya's sudden elevation to business owner disrupts patterns that Linda has relied on for stability and control. Linda might be genuinely worried about how these changes will affect family relationships, even as she's trying to manage those effects through her usual techniques. Maya decides to respond to Linda with more warmth than she showed Derek or Sophia, but still with clear boundaries. Thank you for the invitation, Linda. I appreciate that today was surprising for everyone. Let me get through the initial business transition process, and then we can definitely plan a family dinner to talk about how to move forward together. The response acknowledges Linda's concern, while postponing the family meeting until Maya has had time to establish her own footing. It's neither rejection nor acceptance, but rather a middle ground that preserves relationships while protecting Maya's autonomy. After sending the responses, Maya turns off her phone and sits in the quiet motel room, trying to process the emotional whiplash of the day. This morning she'd driven to Riverside expecting to collect a small memento and endure a few hours of family awkwardness. Tonight she's fielding text messages as the owner of a business and the inheritor of a substantial fortune, navigating family dynamics that have shifted in ways that no one quite knows how to handle yet. The silence feels different now than it did this morning. This morning, silence meant invisibility, meant being overlooked and forgotten and dismissed. Tonight, silence means space to think and plan and decide without other people's voices drowning out her own instincts and preferences. Maya opens her laptop again and begins researching small business management, reading articles about succession planning and family business dynamics and the challenges faced by new owners who inherit existing operations. The information is both overwhelming and reassuring. Overwhelming because it confirms that business ownership involves complexities she hasn't considered, reassuring because it also suggests that many of those complexities can be managed through careful planning and good advice. She takes notes as she reads, creating lists of questions to ask Sarah Mitchell and areas where she'll need additional expertise. Financial management, legal compliance, employee relations, vendor negotiations, marketing strategy, community engagement, growth planning. Each category represents skills she'll need to develop, or professionals she'll need to hire. But Maya also realizes that many of the articles assume business owners are starting from scratch or taking over failing enterprises. Bob has left her a successful, profitable business with established customer relationships and reliable revenue streams. Her job isn't to build something from nothing, it's to maintain what's working while improving what isn't. That distinction feels important because it suggests that Maya's learning curve, while steep, isn't impossible. She doesn't need to become an expert in every aspect of business management overnight. She needs to understand the existing systems well enough to make informed decisions about which ones to keep and which ones to change. Around midnight, Maya finally closes the laptop and gets ready for bed. As she brushes her teeth, she catches her reflection in the motel bathroom mirror and is surprised by what she sees. The face looking back at her is still recognizably hers, but there's something different in her expression, something more solid and confident than she's ever seen there before. She realizes that for the first time in her adult life, she's not worried about whether she's making the right choice or whether other people will approve of her decisions. The inheritance and Bob's letter have given her something she's never had before, external validation that her judgment is sound, her values are worthwhile, her perspective is valuable. That validation doesn't solve all of Maya's challenges or eliminate all of her uncertainties, but it does provide a foundation of confidence that she can build on as she navigates the complexities of business ownership and family relationships. Maya falls asleep, thinking about Mrs. Patterson and her container garden, about the ceramic dog on Bob's desk, about the 18 months of Sunday phone calls that had been preparing her for this moment without her realizing it. She dreams about hardware stores that smell like sawdust and possibility, about customers who leave with more than they came for, about businesses that serve communities rather than simply extracting profit from them. When she wakes up the next morning, Maya's first thought isn't about the drive back to Portland or the logistics of relocating or the family dynamics she'll need to manage. Her first thought is about the animals at the rescue who need specialized care, and how Thompson's hardware might be able to support that work more systematically, and what kind of partnerships might be possible between the business and the organizations that serve the most vulnerable members of the community. It's a strange way to think about inheriting a hardware store, but Maya realizes that it's exactly the way Bob would have wanted her to think about it. Not as a collection of assets to be managed, but as a tool for building the kind of community where everyone has what they need to thrive. Maya showers and dresses quickly, eager to get back on the road so she can begin the process of turning her vision into reality, but first, she has one more stop to make in Riverside. 20 minutes later, Maya stands in the parking lot of Thompson's Hardware and Garden Center, looking at the building that now belongs to her. It's smaller than she remembered from childhood visits, a modest single-story structure with weathered siding and hand-painted signs that Bob had updated periodically over the years. The store won't open for another 2 hours, but Maya uses the key that Sarah Mitchell had given her the night before to let herself in through the employee entrance. The interior is exactly as she remembered it, narrow aisles packed with tools and supplies, the lingering scent of fertilizer and metal and possibilities, the organized chaos that somehow made sense once you understood Bob's system. Maya walks slowly through the aisles, running her fingers along shelves stocked with items she'd never paid attention to as a child, but now recognizes as the building blocks of people's projects and dreams. Screws and nails and brackets that hold things together. Seeds and soil and watering systems that help things grow. Tools that transform raw materials into solutions for problems that matter to the people who use them. In Bob's office, Maya sits in the chair where he'd spent 40 years managing this business, solving problems, helping customers, building relationships that extended far beyond simple commercial transactions. On the desk, exactly where Sarah Mitchell had said it would be, sits the ceramic dog that Maya had made in high school pottery class. The little figurine looks even more lopsided than Maya remembered, its ears slightly uneven and its glaze imperfect in ways that she'd been embarrassed about when she'd given it to Bob. But sitting there on the desk, where Bob had seen it every day for 2 years, surrounded by important papers and business documents, the ceramic dog looks exactly right. Maya picks up the figurine and turns it over in her hands, remembering the afternoon when she'd made it in the high school art room, the nervous excitement of giving it to Bob, the surprise and gratitude in his eyes when he'd unwrapped it. She'd thought she was giving him a simple handmade gift. Now she understands that she'd been giving him proof of her creativity, her care, her ability to make something beautiful and meaningful with her own hands. Maya sets the ceramic dog back on the desk and begins opening file cabinets, familiarizing herself with Bob's record-keeping system and the daily operational details that she'll need to understand. Purchase orders and vendor contracts and employee schedules and customer accounts, all organized with the same careful attention that Bob had brought to every aspect of his business. As she reviews the files, Maya begins to see patterns that confirm what Sarah Mitchell had told her about the success of her suggestions over the past 18 months. Customer retention rates had improved significantly after the loyalty program launched. Profit margins had increased following the organic gardening expansion, community engagement had deepened through the animal rescue partnerships and other nonprofit collaborations. Maya also finds evidence of problems that Derek hadn't mentioned during yesterday's confrontation. Customer complaint letters about rushed service and impatient staff responses. Vendor correspondence about payment delays and contract disputes. Employee exit interviews, citing concerns about workplace culture and management communication. The patterns suggest that Bob had been right to be concerned about the business's direction under Derek's management.
Financial performance had remained stable, but customer satisfaction and employee morale had been declining gradually, creating vulnerabilities that could have become serious problems if left unaddressed. Maya spends the next hour creating her own notes about the business's strengths and challenges, developing a preliminary understanding of where her attention will need to focus once she takes over operations. The work feels natural and engaging in ways that surprise her, more like solving puzzles than managing drudgery. When she finally locks up the store and heads back to her car, Maya feels more confident about her decision to relocate and take on business ownership responsibilities. The work ahead will be challenging, but it's the kind of challenge that builds on her existing skills and interests rather than requiring her to become someone entirely different. As Maya drives out of Riverside toward the highway that will take her back to Portland, she passes the park where she used to feed ducks with Bob's stale bread. This time, instead of feeling like an outsider looking at a community where she didn't quite belong, Maya feels like someone who's coming home to a place where she can finally be useful in all the ways she's always wanted to be. 6 weeks later, Maya stands behind the counter of Thompson's Hardware and Garden Center, wearing a name tag that reads Maya Rodriguez, owner, and helping Mrs. Chen load a bag of premium birdseed into her cart. The elderly woman's arthritis has been acting up again, and Maya has made sure to keep the heavier items on lower shelves where they're easier to reach without assistance. "You know, dear, Mrs. Chen says as Maya carefully arranges the bag to balance the weight properly, this place feels different since you took over. Warmer somehow, more like the old days when your grandfather first opened." Maya smiles, remembering that Bob hadn't actually opened the store. He'd inherited it from his own father in the 1980s and spent 40 years gradually transforming it from a traditional hardware store into something more like a community resource center. But she understands what Mrs. Chen means about the feeling returning to earlier days, when customer service meant genuinely caring about whether people found what they needed to solve their problems. The transition hasn't been without challenges. Derek had ultimately decided not to continue working at the store under Maya's ownership, a decision that had been painful for everyone involved, but probably necessary for his own professional development. He'd taken a position with a regional hardware chain in Sacramento, where his efficiency-focused management style was better suited to corporate expectations and growth metrics. Sophia had been more supportive than Maya had expected, helping to review the financial transition paperwork and offering practical advice about managing business banking relationships. She'd even referred several of her bank's small business clients to Thompson's Hardware when they needed specialized supplies for renovation projects. Linda had required more delicate handling, needing time to adjust to Maya's new status and the changes it represented in family dynamics. The promised Sunday dinner had eventually happened, but not until Maya had been running the business for 3 weeks and could demonstrate that her management approach was working rather than simply explaining her theoretical vision. The conversation had been awkward but productive, with Linda finally acknowledging that Maya's success wasn't an accident or a fluke, but the result of skills and insights that the family had failed to recognize for years.
Skills with her business responsibilities, her commitment to serving both human and animal members of the community. This morning's schedule includes a meeting with representatives from 3 local nonprofits who want to explore partnership opportunities similar to the successful animal rescue collaboration. A community garden project needs bulk supplies for raised bed construction. A literacy program requires materials for building mobile book display units. A senior center wants help designing adaptive gardening tools for residents with mobility limitations. Each partnership represents potential revenue for the business, but more importantly, each one represents an opportunity to use Thompson's Hardware as a platform for community building and mutual support. Maya has discovered that when businesses genuinely serve their communities, profit follows naturally rather than requiring aggressive pursuit. The approach aligns perfectly with Bob's original vision for the store, but it also reflects Maya's own values and professional experience in ways that feel authentic rather than imitative. She's not trying to recreate Bob's exact methods. She's building on his foundation while adding her own innovations and perspectives. Maya's phone buzzes with a text from Jessica in Portland asking for an update on how the business transition is progressing. Maya types back quickly between customers, sharing highlights from the morning sales and the afternoon's nonprofit meetings. Jessica has been Maya's primary sounding board throughout the relocation process, offering encouragement during difficult moments and celebrating successes that Maya's family is still learning how to acknowledge. The friendship has deepened through Maya's major life changes, proving that geographic distance doesn't diminish relationships built on genuine mutual support and understanding. Jessica is planning to visit Riverside next month, partly to see Maya's new life in person and partly to explore potential collaboration between Thompson's Hardware and the Portland Animal Rescue, where she volunteers. Maya's romantic life has also shifted in unexpected ways since her return to Riverside. Dr. Marcus Torres, a veterinarian at her new clinic, has asked her out twice in the past month, and Maya has accepted both invitations despite her initial hesitation about dating a colleague. Their shared commitment to animal welfare and community service creates natural conversation topics, and Marcus seems genuinely impressed by Maya's business ownership rather than intimidated or competitive about her success. The relationship is still too new to predict where it might lead, but Maya appreciates having someone in her life who sees her professional accomplishments as attractive rather than threatening, who understands the demands of caring for vulnerable creatures, who shares her belief that work should contribute to something larger than personal financial gain. Maya's expanded responsibilities have also prompted her to pursue additional education in business management and nonprofit administration. She's enrolled in online courses through UC Riverside Extension, studying accounting principles and marketing strategies and organizational leadership. The coursework is challenging but engaging, providing theoretical frameworks for understanding practices she's been implementing intuitively. The educational investment represents Maya's commitment to growing into her role as business owner rather than simply maintaining existing systems. She wants to be worthy of Bob's trust, not just through good intentions but through competence and continuous improvement. Maya's relationship with her inheritance has evolved significantly over the past 6 weeks. Initially, the money felt overwhelming and slightly unreal, like a windfall that might disappear if she made the wrong decisions. Now it feels like a tool, a means of implementing ideas and supporting initiatives that align with her values and vision. She's used part of the inheritance to establish a small foundation focused on supporting animal welfare organizations and environmental education programs in Riverside County. The foundation's first grant went to the Animal Rescue for purchasing mobile veterinary equipment, enabling them to provide spay and neuter services in underserved communities where transportation to clinics is challenging. The foundation work has connected Maya with other local philanthropists and community leaders, expanding her network beyond the hardware store's immediate customer base. She's discovered that Riverside has an active community of people working on environmental and social issues, people who had been invisible to her during her childhood, but who now welcome her as a colleague and collaborator. Maya's public profile has grown gradually but steadily as news of the store's transformation and her community involvement has spread through local media and social networks. She's been interviewed by the Riverside Press Enterprise about innovative approaches to small business management, and she's been invited to speak at a regional conference about integrating social responsibility with commercial success. The attention feels strange but not unpleasant. Maya has learned to talk about her work with confidence rather than apologizing for her unconventional background or downplaying her achievements. She's discovered that when she speaks authentically about her values and experiences, people respond with interest and respect rather than skepticism or condescension.
The hardware store's success has also attracted interest from other family business owners who are struggling with succession planning and community engagement. Maya has begun offering informal consulting services, helping other businesses develop strategies for balancing profitability with social responsibility. The consulting work draws on all of Maya's professional experiences, her understanding of customer service from her veterinary career, her insights into nonprofit partnerships from her volunteer work, her knowledge of family dynamics from her own complicated history, her business acumen from her secret collaboration with Bob. This afternoon, after the nonprofit partnership meetings, Maya will visit the site where Thompson's Hardware will sponsor construction of a community dog park, the store's largest single community investment to date. The project emerged from conversations with customers who mentioned the lack of safe spaces for pets to exercise and socialize, and it has generated enthusiasm from dog owners throughout the region. The dog park represents Maya's vision of business ownership as community stewardship, using commercial success to fund initiatives that improve quality of life for everyone, not just customers or employees. The project also honors Bob's memory by continuing his tradition of supporting community development through business leadership. Maya has commissioned a small plaque for the dog park entrance, recognizing Bob's foundational contribution to the project and his decades of community service through Thompson's Hardware. The inscription reads, "In memory of Robert Eugene Thompson, who understood that the best businesses grow communities, not just profits." The plaque will be installed next to a larger monument listing all the individuals and organizations who contributed to the park's development. Maya's name appears on that list, not as the primary donor but as one partner among many, reflecting her preference for collaborative approaches over solo recognition. As closing time approaches, Maya reviews the day's sales figures and customer interactions, looking for patterns and opportunities for improvement. The numbers are strong, but more importantly, the feedback suggests that customers are finding what they need and leaving satisfied with their experience. Maya has learned that successful business ownership requires attention to both quantitative metrics and qualitative indicators, both financial performance and community impact, both immediate results and long-term sustainability. The balance feels natural rather than forced, perhaps because Maya's values align with approaches that happen to be good for business. Before leaving the store, Maya walks through the aisles one more time, straightening displays and checking inventory levels and thinking about tomorrow's priorities. The routine has become comforting rather than burdensome, a way of maintaining connection with the physical space and the practical details that enable everything else to function. In Bob's office, Maya updates her planning notes and reviews the week's schedule, blocking time for customer meetings and staff consultations and community events. The calendar reflects her expanded role as not just a business owner but a community leader, someone whose decisions affect multiple organizations and numerous individuals. Maya locks up the store and drives home to the small house she's renting near downtown Riverside, close enough to walk to work when the weather cooperates, and central enough to easily reach customers who need emergency supplies or after-hours consultations. The house isn't permanent, but it's comfortable and functional, a place where she can rest and plan and prepare for the challenges and opportunities that each day brings. In her kitchen, Maya prepares dinner while listening to a podcast about sustainable business practices, continuing her informal education in approaches that align commercial success with environmental responsibility. The integration of learning with daily routines reflects her commitment to continuous improvement and her recognition that effective leadership requires ongoing development. After dinner, Maya calls her grandmother in Phoenix, updating her on the business transition and the community projects that have emerged from it. Her grandmother has been consistently supportive throughout Maya's major life changes,
offering practical advice and emotional encouragement without trying to manage or control Maya's decisions. The conversation reminds Maya that family support can take many forms, and that the healthiest relationships are built on mutual respect and genuine interest rather than obligation or tradition. Maya's relationship with her Riverside family continues to evolve, but her connection with her grandmother has provided stability and perspective throughout the transition process. Before bed, Maya reviews the thank you notes that arrived in today's mail, messages from customers and community partners expressing appreciation for Thompson's Hardware's expanded services and community involvement. The notes represent tangible evidence that Maya's approach is making a difference in people's lives, solving problems, and creating opportunities that extend far beyond simple commercial transactions. Maya falls asleep thinking about tomorrow's schedule and next week's projects and next month's goals, but also about Bob's letter and his recognition of her potential and his trust in her judgment. She's learned that inheriting a business is both a privilege and a responsibility, an opportunity to honor someone else's legacy while creating something distinctly her own. 6 months from now, Maya will look back on this period as the foundation of everything that followed: the expanded community partnerships, the regional recognition for innovative business practices, the successful integration of her veterinary career with her entrepreneurial responsibilities, the development of a sustainable model for small business success that other owners have begun to replicate. But tonight, Maya simply feels grateful for the opportunity to use her skills and values in service of something larger than herself, to prove that Bob's confidence in her was justified, to demonstrate that the quietly overlooked family member was actually the one with the clearest vision and the strongest foundation for building the future that everyone deserves. The ceramic dog sits on Maya's nightstand now, a reminder of the journey from feeling unwanted to being essential, from believing she wasn't enough to understanding that she was exactly what was needed, from accepting other people's limitations on her potential to claiming the full scope of her capabilities and worth. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and new opportunities, new customers with problems to solve, and new partners with visions to implement. Maya will meet those challenges with the confidence that comes from knowing she belongs exactly where she is, doing exactly what she was meant to do, building exactly the kind of community that Bob had always believed was possible. 3 months have passed since Maya first walked into Thompson's Hardware as its new owner, and the autumn air carries the scent of wood smoke and possibility as she arranges the seasonal display near the store's front entrance. Pumpkins from local farms sit alongside garden tools designed for fall cleanup, while hand-lettered signs advertise workshops on winterizing outdoor spaces and preparing gardens for spring planting. The morning rush brings familiar faces and new customers, a blend that has become the rhythm of Maya's days. Mr. Valdez stops by for rock salt before the first frost warning, chatting about his grandson's college applications while Maya helps him load 50-pound bags into his truck. Mrs. Kim needs advice about protecting her rose bushes through winter, and Maya walks her through the garden center while explaining pruning techniques she learned from Bob's old notebooks. Behind the register, Maya processes transactions with an ease that surprises her. The point-of-sale system that once seemed intimidatingly complex now feels like second nature, and she's memorized the inventory codes for hundreds of items. More importantly, she's learned to read customers' needs beyond their specific requests, understanding when someone asking for a simple tool is actually dealing with a larger project that requires different solutions entirely. The phone rings constantly with questions about availability, delivery options, and technical specifications. Maya fields most calls herself, having discovered that direct communication with the owner creates customer loyalty that translates into word-of-mouth marketing more valuable than any advertising budget could purchase. People tell their neighbors about the hardware store where the owner personally helps solve problems, where someone actually listens to their concerns and offers practical solutions. Derek's absence has been felt, but not devastating. Maya hired Carmen Flores, a retired contractor with extensive knowledge of building materials and renovation projects, to handle the technical consultation work that Derek had managed. Carmen's 40 years of construction experience and bilingual skills have actually expanded the store's customer base, reaching Spanish-speaking contractors and homeowners who had previously felt unwelcome in the predominantly English-speaking environment. The staffing change has improved workplace culture in ways Maya hadn't anticipated. Carmen's collaborative approach and patient teaching style have influenced other employees, creating an atmosphere where asking questions is encouraged rather than seen as evidence of incompetence. New team members receive thorough training instead of being thrown into situations where they're expected to learn through trial and error. Maya has instituted weekly staff meetings where employees share customer feedback and suggest operational improvements. The meetings have generated dozens of small innovations that have streamlined processes while maintaining personal service. Inventory tracking has become more efficient through employee suggestions about organization systems. Customer service has improved through shared strategies for handling difficult situations and complex requests. The profit-sharing program Maya implemented has motivated employees to think like owners rather than hourly workers. Sales staff actively look for opportunities to help customers find exactly what they need rather than simply processing transactions. Warehouse workers take initiative to maintain organization and suggest reordering schedules based on seasonal patterns they observe. Maya's veterinary background has proven unexpectedly valuable in managing business operations. The diagnostic skills she uses to identify animal health problems translate directly to troubleshooting equipment failures and supply chain disruptions. The patience required for working with frightened animals helps when dealing with frustrated customers or stressed employees. The animal rescue partnership has evolved beyond Maya's initial vision, becoming a model for other businesses interested in community engagement that generates both social impact and commercial benefit. The quarterly adoption events now attract visitors from throughout the region, many of whom become regular customers after discovering Thompson's Hardware's unique combination of product selection and community commitment. Local media attention has brought opportunities Maya never expected. The Riverside Business Journal featured Thompson's Hardware in a cover story about innovative small business management, highlighting the integration of social responsibility with commercial success. The article generated inquiries from other family business owners seeking consultation about succession planning and community engagement strategies. Maya has begun offering weekend workshops for business owners interested in implementing similar approaches in their own operations. The sessions cover topics ranging from employee motivation and customer service philosophy to partnership development and community needs assessment. Participants pay modest fees that cover Maya's time while building networks among local entrepreneurs committed to values-based business practices. The consulting work has connected Maya with a broader community of business leaders who share her belief that commercial success and social responsibility can reinforce rather than compete with each other. She's joined the board of the Riverside Chamber of Commerce, where her fresh perspective and demonstrated results have influenced policy discussions about small business support and community development funding. Maya's relationship with Marcus has deepened steadily, built on shared professional values and compatible life goals rather than romantic drama or emotional intensity. They collaborate regularly on animal welfare projects that benefit both the veterinary clinic and Thompson's Hardware, creating professional partnerships that strengthen their personal connection. Marcus has proven supportive of Maya's business responsibilities without trying to manage or control her decisions. He understands the demands of owning a service-oriented business because his veterinary practice requires similar attention to customer relationships and community reputation. Their relationship feels like a partnership between equals rather than a traditional dynamic where one person's career takes precedence over the other's. The financial success of Thompson's Hardware has exceeded Maya's projections and Bob's expectations. Revenue has increased 37% since Maya took ownership, driven by expanded customer base, higher average transaction values, and increased frequency of repeat visits. Profit margins have improved through better vendor relationships and reduced employee turnover costs. Maya has reinvested most profits into business improvements and community initiatives rather than taking large distributions for personal use. New equipment has improved efficiency, while enhanced inventory selection has attracted customers who previously shopped at larger competitors. The community foundation she established has funded numerous local projects that generate positive publicity while addressing real needs. The foundation's latest grant supports a partnership between Thompson's Hardware and Riverside Community College, providing tools and materials for students in construction trades and landscape design programs. The collaboration gives students hands-on experience with professional-grade equipment while creating a pipeline of potential employees who understand the store's values and customer service approach. Maya's family relationships have stabilized at a level of mutual respect that feels sustainable rather than forced. Linda continues to struggle with the role reversal that makes Maya the family's most financially successful member, but she's learned to ask Maya's advice about financial decisions instead of offering unwanted guidance about Maya's choices. Sophia has become a genuine ally, referring banking clients to Thompson's Hardware and providing financial consulting that helps Maya make informed decisions about expansion opportunities and investment strategies. Their relationship has evolved from competitive siblings to professional colleagues who support each other's success. Derek remains the most challenging family relationship, maintaining polite distance while clearly struggling with feelings of displacement and inadequacy. Maya has stopped trying to repair their connection, focusing instead on maintaining civility during unavoidable family gatherings. Some relationships cannot be fixed through goodwill alone, and Maya has learned to accept limitations without taking responsibility for other people's emotional responses. The Christmas season brings Thompson's Hardware's busiest period, with customers seeking everything from holiday decorations to home repair supplies for year-end projects. Maya has hired seasonal staff to handle increased traffic while maintaining the personal service that distinguishes the store from larger retailers. The holiday rush also brings reflection about how dramatically Maya's life has changed since last Christmas, when she was living paycheck to paycheck in Portland and dreading family gatherings where she felt invisible and inadequate. This year, she's hosting Christmas dinner at her new house, inviting not just family, but also employees and community partners who have become important parts of her life. The guest list represents Maya's expanded understanding of family as something broader than blood relationships or legal obligations. Carmen and her husband will join Maya's relatives around the table. Marcus will bring his elderly aunt, who has no other family in the area. Several customers who have become friends will contribute dishes to the potluck meal that celebrates community as much as tradition. Maya's approach to holiday entertaining reflects her business philosophy. Success comes from bringing people together around shared values rather than excluding those who don't fit predetermined categories. The celebration will honor Bob's memory while acknowledging the new traditions that Maya is creating based on inclusion and mutual support. The ceramic dog occupies a place of honor on Maya's mantelpiece, surrounded by photos of animals she's helped save and thank you notes from customers whose problems she's solved. The collection represents the integration of Maya's professional life with her personal values, the alignment of work with purpose that Bob had always modeled, but Maya had never thought possible for herself. Late at night, after closing the store and completing the day's paperwork, Maya sometimes sits in Bob's old office chair and reads his letters again, finding new meaning in his words, as her experience deepens her understanding of business ownership and community leadership. The letters feel like ongoing conversations with a mentor who continues to guide her development, even in his absence. Maya has begun writing her own letters to future generations, documenting the lessons she's learning about balancing commercial success with social responsibility, about building businesses that serve communities rather than simply extracting profit from them. The letters will become part of Thompson's Hardware's legacy, ensuring that future owners understand the values and vision that distinguish the store from its competitors. The writing process has helped Maya articulate her business philosophy and identify principles that guide her decision-making. Customer needs come before profit margins. Employee development creates better service than cost-cutting measures. Community partnerships generate more sustainable growth than aggressive marketing campaigns. Quality relationships produce better outcomes than efficient transactions. These principles have proven commercially successful as well as ethically satisfying, demonstrating that Bob's approach to business was practical as well as idealistic. Maya has learned that values-based leadership isn't a luxury that successful business can afford, it's a competitive advantage that creates sustainable success in ways that purely profit-focused strategies cannot match. As winter approaches, and Maya prepares for her first full year as Thompson's Hardware's owner, she feels confident about the foundation she's built and excited about the opportunities that lie ahead. The business has not just survived the ownership transition, it has thrived in ways that benefit employees, customers, and the broader community. Maya's success has validated Bob's judgment while exceeding even his optimistic projections. The quiet granddaughter, who was dismissed as impractical and naive, has proven to be exactly the leader that Thompson's Hardware needed to evolve and grow while maintaining its essential character and community connection. The transformation has required enormous effort and continuous learning, but it has also brought Maya the satisfaction of using her skills and values in service of something larger than herself. She's discovered that business ownership can be a form of community service when approached with the right intentions and executed with genuine care for all stakeholders. Maya's story continues to unfold each day through customer interactions and employee development and community partnerships that create ripple effects extending far beyond Thompson's Hardware's walls. She's building not just a successful business, but a model for how commerce can contribute to community well-being while generating sustainable prosperity for everyone involved. The ceramic dog watches over it all, from its place on Maya's desk, a reminder of the journey from feeling unwanted to being essential, from accepting other people's limitations on her potential to claiming the full scope of her capabilities and worth. Maya has learned that inheritance isn't just about what you receive, it's about what you choose to do with the opportunities and responsibilities that come with unexpected gifts. Tonight, Maya will go home to her comfortable house and call Jessica in Portland and Marcus at the clinic and her grandmother in Phoenix, sharing the day's small victories and planning tomorrow's projects.